Welcome to episode 32 of Pull Up with Miles and Owen. And today it is part two of our season preview, the Eastern Conference. And we have an extremely illustrious guest joining us today, a co host of the Dunker Spot alongside Nikias Duncan, who joined us yesterday to preview the Western Conference. He has a weekly hit on Old Man and the Three with JJ Redick. You can follow him at Steve Jones 20. And I'm gonna say what Zach Lowe says every time. If you want to learn about basketball, there is no better person to follow or people to follow than Steve and Nikias. Steve Jones Jr., welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. The check's in the mail for the intro, so no worries. Excited to talk W going into a very fun season, a very important season. Not shocking that Nikias got the Aces draw, but I'm ready to go.
This is the benefit of having the brand. It's like, hey, if you know if you're the Aces guy, then you get the first pick. But I gotta say, Eastern Conference, a lot of fascinating stuff. And before we get into it, I'm gonna pass it off to Miles. But quick plug for our new branch of the Pull Up Universe, Step Back with Miles and Owen, which we will have our first episode of that show this week as well, just talking opening night and all the games. But Miles, let's get into the Eastern Conference here.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. We start with the Atlanta Dream, and with Atlanta, they were a tough team. Them and I think Nakaya said this yesterday. Them and the Wings were maybe the two most confounding teams in the W last year when it comes to just a lack of consistency. And I think with both rosters, you could talk about the point guard play as maybe being a reason for that. And in 2023, Atlanta ranked 10th in the following passing categories: assists per game, assist percentage, assist ratio. But this is also a team that loves to run, that led the W in pace last year. So the addition of Jordan Canada on paper just makes a ton of sense, especially what she brings on the defensive end of the floor, but that she is someone who can then spearhead that offense and get out and run. Obviously, she's out with an injury. We don't, I believe, have a timetable. It was a hand injury. But projecting forward to when she's back in the lineup, what is their ceiling this year with just that addition, and what do you see working more smoothly in, I guess, what is this, year three now of Tanisha's tenure? I
Yep.
think so.
It's interesting because the Dream, I feel like they have raised the ceiling each year, but they tend to have the same issue to a degree, to where, okay, what happens in the half court? What happens when things slow down? What happens when we stop having our movement and flow? What happens when the defense goes left? And I wonder, because this feels like the year where, okay, we've got all the talent. We've got all the pieces in place. We've got Jordan Canada's point guard play, Ryan Howard continuing to improve and get better, Alicia Gray being able to score and slash. We added Tina Charles, so now we can start two bigs and we can keep our flow, go side to side. So they are a team to where you would not be surprised if they made a push and they improved on last year. You also would not be surprised if the talent doesn't necessarily blend all the way together. They play too slow. It's almost too many post ups. The second unit doesn't come through, and they're the sixth seed. I don't know what to do with the Dream because there's this high variance for me with them.
I think that gets at it perfectly. And I mean, the element to me that is just like you have to start with the fact that at some point Ryan Howard is going to be so good that it starts to solve some of the offensive clunkiness. I feel like we saw her go off in the playoffs last year. She is just elite at this point already, but she hasn't yet gotten to the point where that just makes everything flow so much easier for this offense. And I think that's the element of when Jordan Canada gets healthy that I'm going to be really intrigued to monitor is this finally gonna click and there's gonna be real flow offensively where it's just there's too many people to guard, or could it go the other way where the spacing gets a little clunky? Do you lean one way or the other, and just what are your thoughts on Ryan's ascension here to superstar?
Well, I think Ryan makes it really tough because of the ability to score in so many different ways. I think we've seen, obviously, in transition, push, get right to her shot, can post up, pick and roll. I guess for me, it's what does that open up for the Dream? Does that become something where, okay, now we know Ryan Howard's getting 2 on the ball and we're able to play out of that? And then does that help to where Jordan Canada can now be a playmaker and also end plays if they're in rotation? Or you have the sequence where, okay, we start with one action, we go to the other side. We can kind of keep pressure on teams because we have a starting point to a degree. I think that's where it gets interesting. But then you also have the combination of, well, are we going to start with a post up? Are we just going to throw it in the post and then we score that way? Like, 'cause you could see the balance that could happen where you don't know how to deal with Ryan Howard, you don't know how to deal with our transition play, you don't know how to deal with our post ups, but also they could get in their own way to where which button are we hitting? Like, I think that's the toughest part sometimes with versatility is you have so many things you can do. There's not necessarily one thing that you consistently hammer. And so that's kind of my concern with the Dream. It's like, can we evolve into this just machine to where it's not just moving and flow? We have our talent, and we just kind of blend this together and just put you in a tough spot defensively.
I think that Tina Charles is one of the most talented one-on-one scorers and one of the hardest players to stop in WNBA history. But and as soon as recently as 2021, she led the W in scoring. So her addition for everything that you just said makes sense in terms of just more talent on the floor, more options. But it is going to be finding that balance because we watched her for a long time here in New York where there weren't second options, where there wasn't a Ryan Howard, where there wasn't an Alicia Gray. So you kind of had to funnel the entire offense through her. But that's definitely something early in the season that I'm going to be looking at, especially next to Cheyenne Parker, to see how the two of them can find their space. But one more thing I wanted to bring up before we move off the Dream is I'm not sure there's another franchise in the W that has leaned into the what Athletes Unlimited can provide for their players. And Owen rocking the shirt, the appropriate Athletes Unlimited
I
shirt.
gotta give the plug. Come on.
And I know that Jordan wasn't on the roster at the time that she played at AU, but she played there before her breakout season last year, and she really dedicated herself to that shot. And then Alicia Gray just won this past season of AU. And what it seems to allow, Naz Hillman had a breakout there. Haley Jones played there this past season too. So what it seems to do for a lot of these players is enables them to just play basketball to their strengths and not within a system. But then what we've seen from players is then they come back to the W in their next season and they've taken some of that confidence that they've built because it's like getting back to the basics of, you're on a new roster every week, so just go out there and ball. How do you think something like that could help Alicia Gray in this season, just coming off of her MVP campaign with AU?
I think it's just rhythm and flow. Being able to have that consistent presence and being able to continue to work on your game. So it's just, this is what I do. You have to deal with me. And now I think some of the smaller plays become smoother in transition. I can just go and attack. I don't necessarily have to, I don't want to say buffering, but some of the plays where it's like, okay, I need to swing it because we're running this. Well, no, I got it. Quick catch, quick drive, quick decision. So I think with her ability to slash and her ability to drive and just the overall scoring she brings to the table, being able to keep that sharp all the time is something that can help the Dream because she's someone that we can run plays for, but she can also go get one. And I think that's a really important balance for this team. So I think the totality of it has been really key. And I think people sleep on how impactful her scoring is for the Dream and how that can really help them going forward.
I want to see some Alicia Ryan pick and pop with Ryan setting the screen. I'm a big fan of just putting your two best players into action, especially with Canada out. I think that would be a fun look. All right, Dream down onto the Indiana Fever. Very, very boring off season for the Fever. Not a lot of hype surrounding this team. It's not like they're selling out every game and having to move arenas. No, just business as usual. Here's where I want to start with Indiana. And last night we saw them struggle against a really good team. Shocker. This is what it's going to be. It's not going to be the Indiana Fever just blowing the doors off teams left and right. There's a lot to figure out, and that's okay. That's understandable. To me, for this team to go where it wants to go, it's all about Aaliyah Boston in the interior being the focal point and drawing two on the ball off post ups and just keeping the machine moving. And last night only 6 shot attempts, and one might wonder because you also have Nalissa Smith, who's incredibly talented. You've got this team. You've got Caitlin Clark, who operates with the ball in her hand so exceptionally. Um, do you worry that they are going to struggle to figure out the offensive flow, and is this going to be a case of too many people need the ball in their hands, or do you see, because like one of my favorite things about Aaliyah Boston's game, she's an underrated passer. She keeps that thing moving, and you can see a situation where the chemistry is incredible on offense, but those things take time to figure out. Do you think it's going to take too long to figure out, or do you think this is going to be a pretty smooth fit?
It's interesting. Kind of ties back to the dream earlier, where how do we blend our versatility together? It's the number one thing I had written down coming into this. How do they balance the tempo and execution and flow that they have with what teams are going to present against them? And you mentioned, hey, is it going to take a little bit to figure out? One, it might. Two, they better hope it doesn't, because that opening schedule is not fun for the Indiana Fever.
Woo.
Not ideal. So they're going to get answers one way or the other. It's going to be positive or negative.
Yeah.
I think one of the things for Indiana, they, building off of last year, a lot of movement, a lot of flow, handoffs. We can go side to side. We can go high low. We can, that's part of the positive. I think that's where Caitlin Clark really fits as well, because you don't necessarily know exactly what we're going to go to. I think what the Connecticut Sun did was say, hey, we're going to take a lot of this away. We're going to rotate to Aaliyah Boston, and we have size in the paint. So I think for the Fever, it's going to be trying to figure out how to navigate, okay, what do we do when the side to side isn't this easy? How do we flow when it's not, when we have to get it out of the mud? So you have the positives of having multiple players, but are we ready to, okay, it's just going to be Aaliyah Boston catches on the short roll. The help comes from the interior. It's not necessarily a kick out. How do we play with that? Because they have so many good actions where it's just like, oh, you're just blending your talent. You go empty side pick and roll. It's a quick advance to Aaliyah Boston. Now it's a high low to Nalissa Smith. That's tough to guard. But if we feel like we have the size to take away this post up, we feel like we have the perimeter defense to take away the the pick and roll, put Caitlin Clark in a box, send her to the right hand, play drop. How do we navigate those scenarios where, okay, we're starting with 18 on the clock instead of 20? We're getting to our second option at 12. Where's the movement there? And I think that's going to be the thing they have to navigate and figure out, because, man, the Sun really tried to bog them down, and they succeeded for the majority of the game.
I think that even though the Sun might not be projected to be the number one team in the W this year, they're in that upper echelon, but it's Vegas and then it's everyone else. This might be the most difficult defensive matchup for a team like the Fever that operates inside, but also the Connecticut just has the physical perimeter defenders that can bother Caitlin, and they're just so switchable, especially, yeah, if you're putting AT into any kind of action or DB, like what is actually success to you if you're Christy Sides and you're trying to scheme against whatever they're going to counter with. But in terms of Caitlin, it wasn't the debut that a lot of these new fans were expecting to see. But what we have seen for a long time, and this is not at all a knock on Caitlin, because she's a transcendent talent who's going to very, very quickly find her legs in the W. But it takes guards historically a little bit longer when you're talking about all the extra length, when you're talking about that physicality, the extra size, the whistles that you might not get at this level, and the fact that 1 through 12 is the best player that you might have seen night in and night out in college. There is no let up at all. So it takes a while. We saw that with Kelsey Plum. We saw that with Jackie Young. We saw that with Sabrina Ionescu. We did not see that so much with Ryan Howard, although she does just keep getting better. But guards do historically take a little bit longer to get there. What in your eyes makes that transition so difficult?
I think it's just adjusting to the size and the force and the speed of the game. Like, I think Coach Christy Sides made a really good point about how they're working to adjust with Caitlin Clark and have her learn things and unlearn things from college, and just the value of quick decisions. and you see how there are times where she's in pick and roll and it's a big that just jumps out, hard head, show, and she's trying to go with the spin back that she did in college, and the play's not there anymore. There's help on the roll. You're all the way almost out by half court, and now what advantage do you have? So I think it's just adjusting to that size. I think it's adjusting to the schemes. There isn't much that Caitlin Clark hasn't seen, but it's being executed at such a different level to where the ball pressure is different, forcing to the right hand. Now there's size in the paint. I think that's going to be interesting. Now, the one thing I will say about Caitlin Clark, there are things that we saw in the preseason where it was like, hey, this could translate pretty quickly. The passing, I think, really stood out as far as her teammates having to be ready to, hey, if you're open, the ball's coming to you. The pocket passes were there. So whenever she's able to engage space, if you're dropped back, she's going to hit that pocket pass and we're going to play out of it, which is good when you're the Fever and you have two bigs. So I think that part is going to adjust. I think the drives holding up is something that stands out. Most people don't expect the drives to be something that's consistent. How the finishing goes is what I'm intrigued by. Because again, you mentioned what is the translation? You have a perimeter defender that's long chasing you. You have size in the paint. Can you, finish over that? Can you draw fouls? I think it's just going to be settling in and understanding what the difference is going to be. Like, I feel like that's the biggest thing for me. I want to see how the adjustment is from game 1 to game 2. Now that you've seen a feel for the speed of the game, the size, the attempted, because I think the Sun really threw a bunch of schemes at Caitlin Clark. And so is that going to be the same every night?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the start of their schedule. I just love that it's Connecticut and then 2 games against New York. It's like here are your Eastern Conference foes. Here's Benijah Laney, and if somehow you get past her, then there's Jonquel and Stewie, Alyssa Thomas, Dewana Butter. It's just cool to me that, like, not that I care to cater to the casuals, but it's a little validating for people who just think that Caitlin's going to waltz in and just score 50, like every night. It's like, no, you guys do not understand the WNBA. This is another level. Like, these players are elite and it is going to take time, and that is okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it totally is. It's like saying taking time is okay. It's not a failure at all. And that this is just a sport that's just a team sport that's so predicated on, especially when you are running an offense and have the ball in your hands that much, with that kind of usage rate, it's going to take time to just figure out where everyone goes. And Steve, you brought up running the floor. That's where I think Melissa Smith is going to have a huge year for them, because yeah, if you tell her put your head down and run, she'll be leaking out before the shot even goes up. She's looking for those open court opportunities. And we saw glimpses in the preseason also of Caitlin. She put Natasha Howard onto that highlight, where she went left. So if teams are going to force her to go right, and in college that for her meant going downhill, the counter feels like it's got to be a mid-range game or a floater or something at that level that's not just the extreme outcomes, which made sense in college because she could get to the rim, and finish through that level of contact, or she could get to her spots if she was going left. How long do you think it takes, especially knowing that this is such a condensed schedule this year with the Olympic break, like, just built in? So most of these teams are not they're going to have weeks or 2-week stretches where they're not going to practice. How long do you think it takes development wise to add to your game while also being in the middle of a long season?
I think the one plus development wise is, hey, we're just going to keep playing. Like, there is value. As much as practice is important, hey, we keep getting game reps. We're going to keep getting chances to get better, and you can kind of flush things down the toilet and improve that way. So I think being able to continue to play, see different schemes, see different things that work, that don't work, and adjust night in, night out, that's going to be a positive. And I think in totality for the Fever, it doesn't tie exactly to last year, but that's something they had to figure out last year too. Once they figured out, okay, how do we best use Leah Boston? What are our best options flow-wise? How do we go from side to side? How do we unlock Kelsey Mitchell? Like, there's different things that they have to figure out, because once they figured out, okay, Aaliyah Boston is this, teams reacted to try and take it away. And then you saw the moment where it's like, we have movement. Are we going to take this shot? we didn't take that shot when we had an advantage. Okay, now what do we have? We're bogged down again. So I think that's just a natural back and forth for this team, anyways. But I do think they have the talent overall and the roster depth that just fits what they want to do. Like, I'm intrigued by having Kaylu Samuelson. You know, I've liked what Grace Berger's done development wise. I think, again, the talent of Kelsey Mitchell is going to help with a lot of different things. So they have the pieces in place. It's just kind of trying to figure out, how do we keep that up in the half court, particularly? Because I think when they have it flowing, it looks really good. When in the half court, when it gets tricky, that's where they're going to have to learn and grow, despite the expectations that people may have for them.
Yeah, I love it. I think that something that last year we wanted to see more growth out of was just entry passing. And that's something that I feel like seems like something Caitlin should be able to bring to the table, especially when she's playing in those lineups with Erica Wheeler, who was probably their best entry passer last year. Or then, I mean, unless you want to say Aaliyah Boston might be their best entry passer with the high lows. But they have a lot of talent there. And I think it's just seeing that all gel. So let's move on to the Liberty. We are both in New York, so this is a team that Owen and I'll say, are in New York. This is a team that we've seen in training camp up close. But from the outside, there was the game last night where they had a big fourth quarter comeback on the backs of Benijah Laney Hamilton, and shout out to Jonquel Jones for keeping them in that game for so long. But what I was most interested in last night was the minute breakdown for the new additions, because it was a strange training camp where everyone that they brought in to be the second unit was they were competing overseas, and they all got in at different times. Kennedy Burke first, but she didn't practice for most of camp. And then Niara Sabali, they held her back because they know how long the season's going to be. And then literally last week, Ivana Dojkic showed up on Thursday and played in a game that night in Connecticut. And who am I missing? And Leonie Febish came in on Thursday night, Friday morning, and then had her first practice with the team on Saturday. So they're going to have to figure a lot of this out on the fly. But what were your initial observations of the fit here? Because they're also all going to play with Kayla Thornton, who was a Sixth Woman of the Year candidate for them last year.
You know, I think one of the things I took away from that first game for the Liberty, it feels like they have the pieces they want off the bench. There feels like there's a more of a versatility aspect for them that helps them balance out their lineups. I thought some of the staggering the lineups were interesting, as far as, hey, let's keep Jonquel and Sabrina together, and then, hey, let's keep Stewie and CVS and Laney Hamilton together. And you kind of saw the yin and yang as far as what they ran. Hey, we're going to have more pick and rolls. We're going to have more flares. Over here, we're going to do a lot of things. But I think the versatility stood out. I think when you talk about Febish, I was surprised by the defense. I think that's going to pop over the course of the season as far as being able to navigate screens. I think Kennedy Burke did a really good job as far as, hey, I do my job. I can knock down these shots. We're going to play out of this. But it just fit into what they wanted to do defensively. And I think that helps the Liberty to be able to have that kind of versatility where we don't always have to just show and hard every time and rotate behind it. We can have some of that where we're engaged at the level and we're dropping back, we're switching more. That kind of fits in. So I think the fit's going to be really good. Like Dojkic, I thought had really good minutes. It didn't pop in the box score, but hey, get it up, pick and roll, quick decision, drive and kick. I thought she did that really well, and that fits with what the Liberty want to do. So I think that second unit and that versatility and being able to blend the lineups together, I think that's a really big key, because you don't necessarily have to have all five that are going to play together. They're always going to play with one of the anchors. So I think that is one of those things where I was pleasantly surprised in that game.
The rotations were definitely interesting, but that had the feel of, we need to figure out what combinations work. And I think you brought up a great point where the way to do that is to look at the players that Sandy Brondello already trusts, which are the starting five that have built that chemistry, and extrapolate out first, like what those lineup combinations are, and then what the backfill is from there, because I think that's where she'll be playing around is with the rest of those lineups. But just in terms of I love that you brought up, because this is what they've been preaching to us, the coaching staff, and Jonathan Cole, but Sandy Brondello, Olaf Lang, all of them have said in the last couple of weeks to me that like that was the goal with this second unit, was versatility. Was last year their bench on paper, I thought before the season, looked like the deepest second unit in the league. They were a lot of big names and a lot of players that are very talented, but might not have worked in the same complementary way that this unit projects to potentially. And Olaf Langen specifically had talked about the length in the backcourt, because so much of this conversation last year was that's where the Liberty were exposed in the finals when they came up against the Aces. And in having Ivana Dojkic, who's 5'11" and very active on defense, we're going to see how she does, because last year she didn't really have a consistent role. There was a point where she was the focal point outside of Jewel Lloyd for like 2 weeks, and then she was out of the rotation. And before that, she was barely in, and then they were trying to figure all of that out. But if she has that consistent role, and then Leonie Phoebus just coming off of the bench as a 6'4" guard, that gives them a lot of options in terms of who you can then have behind them. If you want to have a lineup in there with KT and Benijah both scrambling, then that gives you a lot more freedom. They can go small. They can have Stewie at the 5 a bit if they want to. And obviously the growth of Niara Sabali is going to be important. But who's the X factor when you look at the starting 5 that can really build off of last year to potentially take this team to over the hump, which is just Las Vegas at this point?
The X factor for me is always Benijah Laney Hamilton. I think with her ability to defend almost anyone you need her to, and when she is involved offensively, I think it changes the Liberty and how they can attack every time. You mentioned the Mystics game. I thought when she decided and saw that they were going under everything, and she said, "I'm going to take all these shots and make them," that changes things. But even earlier in the game, when she's involved in an action and screening for someone, all of a sudden you look at who's spaced. It's Sabrina on the perimeter. It's Stewie on the perimeter. It's John Quill on the perimeter. Okay, well, who do we prioritize? What does that open up for us? So I think the better that Benijah plays, the better the Liberty go. And I think, it's one of those things I would love to point out how important she is for this team on both ends of the floor and what she opens up, especially, as they dip into Benijah being able to post up. Where's the help coming from? Is there no help coming? Being able to attack matchups, her drives, with how important that is to the Liberty's overall flow. So that's the X factor for me. And Courtney Vandersloot making layups.
Yep. It's reductive of me to say this because it's almost like cliched analysis, but I do think this really applies to the Liberty. Is like Benijah is the barometer of this team. She's the heartbeat. She's everything. And if Benijah is involved in the offense enough, they just are better. They are playing better when she is an integral part of what is going on. And we saw this in the playoff run last year. She had such a great move last night. She had a couple like plays, and full transparency here. Miles and I were at a wonderful party put on by Slam Magazine. So let's just say we were socializing as we were watching. There was a lot going on. So I wasn't exactly as locked in as I might normally be, but still, it was impossible not to see Benijah with a little like crossover into a spin and finish with the left. I think she had like one of those pick sixes that she always, has on the defensive end. Just such a phenomenal player. And then the real quick before we move on here, the other two people I wanted to mention going back to the bench, Kennedy Burke, just one of my favorite players. Number one, just such a nice person, wonderful person to interview. My first year covering the league in 2020 was the bubble season, and she was playing with Indiana. And one of my favorite games, like ever, was the doldrums of the regular season, and the Fever, who were not good that year, had 8 players active. Kennedy Burke was starting, and they were facing Stewie and Sue Bird and the Seattle Storm at full strength, Jewel Lloyd, everyone. And Indiana stole the game. Kennedy Burke had like 23 points. It's like she can really be a two-way player off the bench. and just hasn't really had a chance to like stick in a rotation enough to prove that. And then last point, Jonquel Jones. I mean, I think that Miles and I saw this up close last year. Jonquel was not healthy to start the season. First half of the year, she was just figuring it out. She was just getting back on her feet. She was shaking the rust off. She wanted to kind of build up that conditioning, but also just the trust in her lower body again to be able to bang down low. And second half of the year, she was the team's best player. I think that her starting this season healthy is so massive, and I could see first team all W. I could see another MVP season. I would believe anything because she's just that good. Are you willing to go that far? Like where do you see her going this year?
Being able to start off healthy is one thing. Being able to impact the game the way she did against the Mystics is another. And so if you're going to start off with Jonquel at that level, I think it makes it Liberty really tough. Now, I don't know if I'll go MVP all the way because we don't have time, but it's going to be a weird MVP year. I have a gut feeling it's going to be an odd MVP year.
Ooh.
Or it could just be the same, top three. Either way. But I think the fact that Jonquel can play inside and out opens up so much for the Liberty because you can space her, you can run pick and pop, you can have her in handoffs, and it helps their flow. When the Liberty are able to have those possessions where, okay, we run horns. Stewie looks for Jonquel in the post. There's nothing there. Now Stewie goes and sets a screen for Sabrina. There's two on the ball. You got to rotate. Oh, that's Stewie. We need to rotate to that. Oh, Jonquel Jones is wide open. Like the fact that you can highlight Jonquel in so many plays, but also she can just get it out of the flow, that's what makes it dangerous. And she's so important to the Liberty's defense. So I would not be surprised if she had that type of first team all-W season because she's healthy. And I think overall, the Liberty have a better sense of who they are based on last year, to where if you go back to the last year, how they started against the Mystics, where they were, hey, we want to be this. And the Mystics were like, no, you can't. And they had to figure out how to get to their movement, how to get their defense. They already have that in tow. So I think that's a big plus. It all kind of ties together.
I know we gotta move on, but just Jonquel, I had a couple of quick anecdotes on her because JJ is just a joy to cover all the time. But one quick stat last year, it wasn't until the finals last year that the Liberty lost a game where JJ doubled. I believe they were like 14-1 or something like that. So as she set the tone in cleaning the glass, they won games. But also JJ at camp the other day, the last day of training camp, I spoke to her and I asked her what the biggest change was from last year to this year. And she said, I don't know if we've got better chemistry. I don't know if I'm healthier, but what I do know is that the spacing is way better. And she's like, I don't know what to attribute it to, but everything is just moving much smoother. And I think it's probably a little bit of all of that. But I think that's scary because when the team is moving well, it's not just freeing up jump shots. It's inside out. It's drives. It's cuts. And I think that JJ and Benijah are the two players that we've highlighted, but that's something that Stewie can do as well. We saw Sabrina with a little bit of a mid-range game yesterday added to her flow this year. But I think that's if they can be multi-level scorers, and you did bring up Sloot earlier too, that's what can make this team more dynamic. Because how many times did they win a game last year if Stewie goes off for 9 points? I think I know the Mystics are not projected to be at the top tier of the league this year, but they also still have one of the most hard-nosed defenses out there, and they executed against the reigning MVP. But the Liberty were still able to come out with that win. So I think that's pretty telling too.
Absolutely. I just want to say it on the record here. Asia's my MVP. Asia will always be my MVP. Asia will win MVP this year. Just want to throw other names out into the conversation, give some people some love, but do not worry. All right. We're
ever unbiased Owen Pence.
And not
I gotta be transparent in my bias. I mean, come on. All right, moving on to the team that New York just beat in a probably more competitive game than a lot of people might have anticipated. They opened last year against Washington. Washington was in a higher tier last year, and this year it seems like more of a rebuild. But they showed a lot of fight. They have a lot of intriguing players. I'm gonna do the lazy journalism thing and just say talk about Shakira Austin in year 3, because that's where I want to go with it. Is Shakira Austin to me is like the real centerpiece of what they're building. And I'm curious, just any thoughts you might have, anything you enjoy about her game, what you're looking for her to build upon after a year last year that frankly her development just got it got upended by injury.
The injuries took it out, but Shakira Austin's back, and I can't wait to see how she continues to build, because last year I was so impressed by, the aggression offensively. I'm going to seal in the post. I'm going to catch where I want. If I need to face up, I have the footwork to get to my shot. Different post moves stood out to me. I think the defense continues to stand out and improve. So even if it's going to be a minutes restriction to start, very hard to deal with, can defend multiple positions, can keep the ball in front, will protect the paint and get block shots. Being able to mix in pick and pops stands out to me, to where, hey, it's not only me facing up and driving and being able to finish that way, but I can pick a pop, make a shot. I can hit one deep in the clock. I think the overall nature of her game developing offensively is going to be so important for the Mystics, because now we can really run a lot of different things. And I think she's going to have the room to grow. So I'm excited to see exactly how they keep using her and exactly what she does, because it's two-way players like that. There's not a ton of them that are like Shakira Austin. I'll put it that way.
In talking to her last year, or maybe it was her rookie season, she just had a great answer about growing up and being taught to guard guards and the switchability that we see, and she is so dominant down low as the backline defender. But to be able to switch in the pick and roll and hang with your ones and your twos and your threes is something that she has been intentional about her entire life. Like, she has been developing for that. And I think that's a cool thing, because, we focus on the offense, and that's going to be that's probably going to be the biggest element of her game that continues to take real steps. But the defense has been there from day one, and it's cool to hear kind of what went into that, because she's just so phenomenal.
Well, my transition off of that is, when we talk about, we've thrown around, the estimated arbitrary tiers that we think that the W teams will fall into without us having played the games yet, which I just want to say huge caveat, because there's so much talent in this league that we're talking about. Shakira Austin and Ariel Atkins have a very good chance to be Olympians this year. And this is the team that you're saying might not make the playoffs or might be in a rebuild. And Brittany Sykes has the potential to go off for 30 points and 5 steals on any given night. And I just want to once again just acknowledge, and I know expansion's coming, all that, but how just deep all of these rosters are. Because the talent is ridiculous and it's getting better and better every year. But when you're talking about Shakira Austin and her ability to help defensively, imagine you are a guard that is working so hard to free yourself from Brittany Sykes or from Ariel Atkins. And then what is your reward? Is a chase down block from from Shakira Austin. This backcourt is so dynamic, and they lost Natasha Cloud, and that was kind of a three-headed monster there, but the two of them are still there. When we're talking about this team, how I feel like any given night, just playing defense first. And Ariel Atkins looked fantastic last night too. And I know she got off to a slow shooting start last year, and that kind of tainted her numbers, her year-end numbers. But where would you rank this backcourt, this Brittany Sykes, Ariel Atkins backcourt, when you think about both ends of the ball against anybody in the W?
Well, I think it's certainly one of the more underrated backcourts together. I think one of the things, if you're wondering about the Mystics and, hey, obviously, who's going to run the one, how do they generate offense, I think you have the ability to free both of them up offensively to where Brittany Sykes can hit more of those drives, to where there's more room for her to attack and pick and roll, and for overall for Ariel Atkins to just get a boost usage wise. I think that's important, especially with the versatility, being able to use her off handoffs. She can self create and pick and roll. I think that's important to have those two going. And I think defensively, they cause havoc. They're not fun to deal with. Like, that's my overall thought with the Mystics. They're not fun. Like, they're going to be annoying. Like, I don't know how many wins it's going to translate to, but with that defense, they're going to be a bother. And their ability to kind of space the floor, having Shakira and Dolson playing together is kind of ideal and fun. But where would I put them in the whole W backcourt wise? Can I get myself in trouble?
You definitely can. And I mean, it's tough because, like, in the framing of the question, I almost think of them more as like two and a three. Like it's sort of backcourt, but I think of Slim more as just a wing. I don't know. But I see where you're going with it. It's just not a traditional 1 and 2.
Well, I guess yesterday they were putting Carly, right? Was Carly playing the 2 maybe yesterday? Who knows? Like,
Actions. I mean, she was almost looking like a 1 out there, on certain half court possessions.
I'm gonna go top 4. I'll say top 4. That seems safe enough.
That's safe. I like that's safe. Good. That's perfect answer.
I'm trying to figure out if I can guess your other 3 now. Because Vegas
And Seattle for
and
sure.
Seattle, and now is it Atlanta? Is it New York? Is it What's your other team that we're missing here?
Yeah, I just want the sip.
Is it Indiana?
It's a secret. I love it.
Maybe it's New York.
Okay.
It feels like New York.
There's a lot of there are a lot of there's a lot of hardware in that backcourt already. So I get it. But there's, as I just said, there's a ton of talent in the WNBA. Let's move on to another team that I feel like yesterday, Nikias, we just kept on asking him questions about, like, this team's a contender, this team's a contender, where now you're getting the what are the Mystics gonna do? What are the Dream gonna do? And now what are the Sky gonna do? This is a very, very different Chicago Sky team from the last time we saw them. They went from having 0 draft picks to making a lot of moves to get themselves into a position to turn the page, which was very, very bold. And I think that the combination of that and bringing in Teresa Weatherspoon, who is maybe the best motivator I've ever seen of people, and then to draft personalities that will respond positively to the love that she shows, to the hard-headedness that she shows, to just the grit, the run through the wall speeches that I don't know how she's got all of those in the chamber all the time. But this is a team that is, like you just said, that the Mystics could potentially annoy some opponents. I feel like the Sky have some of that as well. And looking at Dana Evans really getting the keys this year. There was a question Owen asked yesterday, and I know that I'm just circling around this, but there was a question Owen asked of Nikias yesterday about the Sparks, where he said, if you are going to take out the wins and the losses, but you want an idea of what concrete, tangible success looks like at the end of the day, what has to happen for the Sky to, come September, say 2024 was a successful step forward for this franchise?
Well, I think everything you said is what is going to lead the Sky to be able to feel that way at the end of the year. I think Coach Weatherspoon is setting the table and setting the culture. If you watch away from the preseason with one thing, she's into it. She's active. She's involved. And this team is going to bleed that identity. I think defensively, they're going to have the mindset. Will they have the success? I'm not so sure. But they're going to compete every single night on the end of the floor. And when you look at Marina Mabry and Dana Evans, they may have a lot to carry offensively at times. They're empowered by Coach Weatherspoon. You know, when you see Marina take some of the shots that we've seen Marina take over the course of her career, right? It's a little different when your coach is now like, yeah, shoot that thing, high five, slap on the, you know what I mean? Like that's a little different. Dana Evans fully unlocked. Angel Reese competing every night in different ways. So I think Angel Reese being able to go play for that coach and have this window for them to build that culture to where trying to set every screen, trying to get every rebound, trying to steal all the time. I think their identity is going to be formed throughout the season. And I think it's going to be that mindset. You have to deal with us. We're going to defend. We're going to compete. I don't know how many wins it looks like, but I do believe that they're going to believe in who they are as they figure it out. It kind of reminds me of like the Storm from last year to a degree, where we're kind of setting the table for who we are. We may not have everything we need, but this is our identity. And I think Chicago's going to be the defensive version of that.
I'm so excited to watch this team. I love the empowerment comment you made because I think it's so true. Like you just love to see players like Dana Evans and Marina Mabrey just feel confident and not be having to think twice about, oh, do I shoot it here? Excuse me. In terms of the bigs, one thing that I love about this roster and what they did in the draft is that you have vets here that are going to be really essential to the development of Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso when Camila gets healthy. Who better to learn from than Elizabeth Williams on the defensive end? I would love to hear your thoughts on the fit of Camila and Angel. Does it even matter yet? Do we even need to, am I getting ahead of myself to wonder, is this a 4 and a 5 that can work in the WNBA once it's time to start winning games? Or is it way too early for that? And hey, we just took the 2 best players available and we're gonna let them rock and we'll figure that out later because right now it's just about the development.
I think for me, I would probably lean the latter. Like let's add the talent that fits what we're trying to do. Yeah. And we can have to deal with the blend part later, but there's no way you can pass up on Cardosa. And if you have Coach Weatherspoon, it makes a ton of sense to get Angel Reese. So that overall is going to help our culture because with Camila, rim running, seals, defense, Angel Reese competes, seals, defense. So even in worst case scenario, if it's just yin and yang, you are better off overall. But now if you can now build that culture, you have that defensive mindset and you can play them together as they grow, that becomes even a tougher thing to deal with. If that's your front court of the future together, how do you conquer that? When we talk about high lows, that could be a thing. Like Angel Reese is going to continue to develop. So I wouldn't necessarily worry so much about they can't work together and more like we have pieces that are going to take us where we need to go in the future.
That's also the feeling that I have. And I often think like we always frame, or not always, but I think the inclination, the impulse is to frame questions of fit from an offensive centric perspective. And I love the thought of everything you were saying, which is like, how fun is it going to be? That moment that I think they had in the SEC championship game where Angel's, kind of talking some shit in a very like friendly, fun way, and Camilla's so here for it. Like that energy on the same team is so cool to me, and defensively is where that fit could just be so dynamic. It's like what better, of a back line for your front court than to just have that energy, that competitiveness, that grit, and just the defensive talent that they have. So I couldn't be more excited. Miles, do you have anything on Chicago before we go to team number 6?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add that I don't know if there's a team that has more compelling narratives and storylines and players that have really come from every corner of basketball to land on this roster. And it comes back to Teaspoon again, where it's like, this is the perfect player for someone like a Kennedy Carter to see where her career's at. Diamond DeShields returning to Chicago after devastating injuries and battling back, and just that redemption storyline. Kaiser Gondrzik getting back into this lineup. Izzy Harrison signing the contract last year and then not being able to play with the team. there are just so many people, and we've talked about a lot of the starters. Michaela
Michaela.
Wede, Mick is one of our absolute favorites. And she hasn't found a home yet, but was really strong with Phoenix last year. There's just so many people that because I think that that's where it comes back to with Teaspoon, where these are people first, and then these are players. But then when you put all of these personalities into the room, you're like, okay, wait, we this is going to translate because we have all of them empowered to be their best selves and encouraged to kind of grow from that. And I think like it could spectacularly blow up. Like that's a possibility. That's always a possibility. But I think what's more likely is that like this might be at the top of my they might not be the best team in the W, but they might be must-watch basketball for me just because of how much I think we're going to see these players really grow and learn about themselves from one another from Teaspoon. And that's really exciting if you're a Chicago Sky fan who might have last year felt like the roster, you didn't know what was coming next. Like this is a fun rebuild, I think.
It's such a fun rebuild. Yeah, Steve. Anything else on Chicago here?
Oh no, you guys nailed it exactly that way. I want to see what it looks like. Honestly, if I could go with a semi-hot take, Chicago would be one of those teams where I'm like, wow, the record is a little bit more surprising than I thought until the league catches up with them potentially.
Yeah,
So where it's like, you know, I mean, there might be a surprise, and now, oh wait, we know what you're running offensively. You can't score X, Y, Z. But it'll be fun to see it play out.
there could be a little like Tibbs potential of like doldrums of the regular season, just like grind out some wins when just like another team is just tired and like doesn't really. And Chicago's like, we don't take nights off. That's not what we do. So that would be fun. I agree. I'm like, if I'm ranking the teams in terms of who I'm excited to watch, Chicago's definitely higher than where their record will be, in the standings at the end of the season. But even that is not a sure thing. Maybe they win more than we think. All right, final team in the Eastern Conference. Disrespect. We left them for last. We're not even talking about the Connecticut. How dare we? No, there's no disrespect here because this team is so damn good every year. And I have to say, like, and this is not an overreaction to last night, which will be 2 nights ago when you all are watching or listening to this. It's not an overreaction to beating Indiana opening night. But the thing that strikes me about this Connecticut roster, this Connecticut team, other than the fact that we're in year 2 of Stephanie White now, and I think that's important. She is really damn good at this. And year 2, you just can hit the ground running in a way that you're unable to in your first season when you're implementing everything. And when a team is undergoing change after having this spectacular era with Kurt Miller as their coach. But to me, yes, Alyssa Thomas, superstar. Dewana Bonner, legend, Hall of Famer. Brianna Jones is back, perhaps, and I hate this framing, but I'm going to use it anyway. Like one of the most underrated players in the league. Anytime you look at statistics, at all inclusive statistics, Breezy is on the top 10 of offensive and defensive advanced metrics. But to me, what was cool about this first game was Ty Harris and Dejanay Carrington starting and the depth that they can bring off the bench to mix and match. How impressed are you with the building of this roster? Because to me, I'm like, ooh, it's clicking, and we're starting to see the benefits of Ty Harris being handed the keys for real extended stretches last year and performing so well. Dejanay Carrington has already gotten real playoff experience in the semifinals against New York. So now it's like you can feel really good about them as your 1 and 2. And oh yeah, we also have Tiffany Mitchell and Mariah Jefferson and Rachel Banham and Ono coming off the bench. This is a deep team. How impressed you, or what strikes you about this roster construction?
Well, I think it ties into this being year 2 with what Stephanie White overhauled last year with them offensively and improving the offensive flow and maximizing Alyssa Thomas. Now we kind of know what we need and what works and what doesn't work. And you mentioned the experiences that Harris and Dejanay had last year. Now they can hit the ground running. Now, hey, we know where the handoffs are. We know defenses are going to go under. We know where our shots are. We know we can attack a transition. We can hit the drives. The guard play is so important for the Sun. So the opportunities are going to be there. And I think when you look at Rachel Banham, I think that's such a key addition for the Sun. Just because one, they always need shooting. No disrespect, pun intended. But she fits into what they do movement wise, so it's just an easy fit, and it's not like, hey, Rachel Banham, you have to do a whole bunch with the ball in your hand. Sorry, Minnesota, but now you can just kind of play out of what we do, and so I think roster construction wise, you're seeing them kind of be able to navigate and build off. Okay, we had to figure some things out last year, but we are also bigger again because Bree Jones is back. We have Ono, so now our defense can be a little bit more active to where, hey, we have size in the paint. Alyssa Thomas, why don't you play off ball a little bit? Why don't you rotate a little bit more? DeWanna Bonner rotating. That's just size and length that you have to deal with over and over again on top of Harrison Carrington pressuring you. And so I just think it's the blend for the Sun that makes it really tough to deal with them. And they always find a way to have a chip on their shoulder. So you talk about Ty Harris and Dejanay Carrington, it felt like they played like with a chip on their shoulder. Like, we should have had this opportunity before. We should have been in this. Like, this should be us. And what do you do with Alyssa Thomas to where it just, hey, we get to stop Alyssa Thomas going a million miles an hour. Hey, no matter what you do, Alyssa Thomas is open at the free throw line. Oh, you did help. Here's an interior pass to Bree Jones. Like, it's just, they have layers. Like, I think this is a team that has an identity. I think that's going to have value for them.
There's so much flexibility on this roster. And I think especially early in the season, as we see Breezy come back on a minutes restriction, I think that's actually going to be helpful for Stephanie White to play with some of these lineup combinations. But in talking about her in year two, a little thing that I noticed and I loved was that it was the returners in Dejanay, in Ty Harris that got the start yesterday. And I think that says a lot about the trust that they've earned, about the system that Stephanie White is employing. I'm curious to see what the lineups look like in different games. Is this something that's going to change day to day? But it seemed like there was intentionality behind playing both players who can be physical on the perimeter against Indiana, knowing everything that they had going into that game. Because depth chart wise, I might have expected to see at least one, if not both, of Tiff Mitchell and Mariah Jefferson in that first five. Although Ty Harris did equip herself really well. Dejanay was at times out of the rotation last year, and then came up, like Owen said, huge in the playoffs for them. So a more stable role for those returning players was fascinating yesterday, and I want to see how that plays out. And yeah, Rachel Banham getting 23 minutes might have been the biggest surprise for me. I know it was a 20-point game, but I was surprised that wasn't more evenly distributed to some of these other guards that were in the second unit too.
I think in the back of my head when we're talking about it, I wonder how much the roster construction allows for different guards to be played at different times, because we don't traditionally need a point guard at times, depending on with how they move the ball with their movement.
And Alyssa Thomas.
Alyssa Thomas, you can just flow through Bree Jones. DeWanna can make plays, so we can just kind of navigate how we want to. To the point about Dejanay, kind of being out of the rotation, I think how important it was for her to not just get the start, but hey, you guard Caitlin Clark. You turn the water off. That's going to be your job, and how that enhances and like, oh no, I'm really a part of this. Like, this is what we're doing. I just think the Sun are going to have those moments where the offense seems to dissipate. As much as they've improved, it always happens. But I don't know how many teams really want to sign up to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. I do think that you saying turn the water off in response after Dejanay did talk about cramping up because she was not drinking enough water. It was a nice little connection there. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what Dejanay is going to do this season. And it's really exciting because she was such a dynamic scorer in college at Baylor, but also just a hard-nosed defender. And to see all of that come together would be really, really awesome. And Ty Harris last year, we've been saying for years, give her an opportunity, and she got one and she ran with it. And then yesterday or Tuesday, whenever you listen to this, really set the tone, especially early in that game with her long range shooting. So just love all of it. Ty Harris, friend of the pod. Um,
Shout out to Muffin, the
yeah.
legend.
Do you have anything else in the sun, or are we getting to our last question here, Owen?
Steve.
I guess we're getting to our last question.
No, if you got anything more on the sun, we don't want to leave any room for disrespect responses to this podcast. We want to go as long on Connecticut as possible.
Okay.
I
am intrigued to see how and when they fit in Queen Egbo.
Yes.
It may just be like insurance, but they have a lot of bigs that work. And I guess for me, I'm just wondering if you're Connecticut, how important is it to just make sure DeWanna Bonner gets the type of shots that she wants to get up and the different ways you can use her within that offense? I think that's probably the key. But Connecticut's very good. I would like for them to actually get some of that respect.
Yes.
Yeah, Queen's interesting because I think if you have her for when a Dallas comes to town or something like that, but like a team that I would have said that about was probably Indiana, a team that has some of that interior size and also familiarity for Queen Egbo. But yeah, how they deploy these different lineups, especially like I mentioned before, early in the season as Bree Jones works her way back up to full strength. There's a lot of flexibility here. And that is very, very scary for opponents knowing how condensed the season's going to be, that you have so many options that you can lean on, and that scouting is going to be hell, I'm sure, for anyone that's going to be taking on Connecticut.
Yeah, not something I would envy, having to do the Sun Scout as like, oh, I got to do the Sun Scout tonight. All right. Well, we've reached the end of the Eastern Conference preview. And so we have one final question. And this is, I forgot to mention this yesterday, but we asked this to Nikias yesterday. And this question, Danny Barlavi, our good friend, dear friend, came up with this question, and we love it. And it's just to give you and Nikias your flowers. Like, I said this yesterday. I can't think of anyone better in this space who does what they do than you guys. Just we're so lucky to be able to learn from you guys. And I said it in relation to the NBA space yesterday too, because Miles and I are Knicks fans, and we are used to like takey analysis and just boring talking points. And it's so nice to just hear people analyze the game in such a comprehensive way. So we're so lucky to have you on the pod. And the question at the end of this is, what do you love about working with Nikias, or just Nikias as a person in this space?
For me, it's watching his growth overall and being someone who we think similarly about the game, but we have different mindsets. And so it's an opportunity to talk about the game and talk through the game and see different things and understand how you can learn from someone else. Like there are hunches or things that he may point out where I'm like, I'm not so much. But it's a thought that I now have. So now I'm looking for it, whether it's like offensive rebounding or spacing point. And being able to bounce off those ideas, he works hard, cares about the game. He's always trying to learn. And so that kind of keeps me invigorated as the resident old of the group, to where I have to keep my mind sharp and I have to make sure I think about different angles. And the more you do it with someone, you kind of know, okay, this is what they may end up thinking. Let me think about this as a counter, or let me think about what they're doing with this. And so either I can build off his point and point something else out, or I can push back a little bit and now we have a different discussion, or I can just kind of try and explain a different thing and go big picture with it. So I think for me, that's kind of been the best part about it, is just it's been a really fun way to continue to learn about the game and continue to discuss it the way that I would want people to want to hear about it, if that makes sense. Like the game is always the story. And so to be able to have places where we can kind of do that is the most important thing for me. On in the NBA and the WNBA. and being able to showcase that in a different light. Like for me, I just want to make you think. If I can make you think about something, I can make you laugh, I won.
Everything,
Well,
everything that I wanted to say, you've touched on there too, which is just whenever I listen to a podcast that you guys do, whenever I join a playback, because you guys have the most informative playbacks that I've watched, and my favorites of them are actually the game rewatches that you do, and that you can just go through play by play on Synergy and show us an action half a dozen times. Um, the way that you both manage to be caring and empathetic to the fans in this space, understanding that everyone is bringing different levels of basketball experience, basketball knowledge, and making your content accessible and engaging is just something that I'm grateful for, because I think I have probably like half of my articles might refer to you guys at this point nowadays. So thank you for making me smarter. You make me better at my job. But just to be able to kind of share this space with you guys, I just wanted to say thank you. And both of you guys coming on and doing this was the perfect way for us to start the season, because now, like you just said, we have a lot of stuff to focus on. Thank you, Steve, so much. And we're just rooting for you guys forever. And we're lucky to call you colleagues in this space.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me. And then if I had gone first, I would have made sure that you asked Nikias a New York Liberty defense question. So if he comes back on this year, I need you guys to ask him a New York Liberty defense question, because he very quickly noted today that the Liberty defense wasn't that bad after peppering me with, can the Liberty play defense? So I just want to make that point right now.
Don't worry. I will ask Liberty questions of anybody at any time. So we'll make sure to bring Nikias back just for that one question. We'll have a very short podcast with just that one.
Episode 40.5. Just one question.
Thanks so much, Steve. This was great. And everybody, like Owen said at the top, go follow Steve on Twitter at SteveJones20. Follow them on Playback. I don't know what Playback currently looks like, but when they're on there, you might be watching basketball. I remember watching, I think it was dodgeball with you guys last summer. Maybe some kickball. So there are a lot of sports out there to break down, and they do it all with humor, with knowledge, and with intention, which I think is maybe the most important thing of all. So thank you again, Steve, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you. Y'all have a good one.